Welcome back, everybody, to Week 7 of the NFL. This is your buddy Choppadong coming at you with another quick-hitting video. This is the short list. These are the core plays. These are the players that I will be building with most of my lineups around the industry in DFS NFL for Week 7. Let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about these players. Let's show you why we like them. But let's also show you a little bit about the DFS Army while we do so, because, you guys, this is the best resource you could possibly have for your game. People are still sitting on the fence. I don't understand why. We go night in and night out, day in and day out, producing winning players, and teaching guys brand new to the sport how to go out and win $1,200 in NBA like we did last night. The guys that never played NBA before. We have tools like this in the research station. We have a domination station, optimizer. Things are rocking and rolling inside the DFS Army, and the most important thing is our Slack channel where our coaches talk with our players and our contributors one-on-one or in group format all day long, 24/7. You can always find a coach that's awake and is willing to talk DFS with you and get better. What I'm trying to do today to show you these quick picks is run through a little bit of what we talk about. We had a podcast drop last night. It's our flagship podcast. Hopefully you saw it. Let's go find it. Well, you could click on NFL podcast. You could probably just click on the NFL tab, to be honest with you. Open it up, and I'll show you that it's going to be one of the lead articles in our website, in our slate, in our list of articles. What I'm going to do is walk down real quickly with you. It is a read-along interactive article that goes down. This is where you'd play the podcast itself, and down through here we're going to get down to the graphics that accompany the podcast with some bullet points and a couple little things that I put together to follow along with. But you're going to see the point spread, you're going to see the implied team totals and the overall over-under of the game. You're also going to see the DVP numbers, which team is facing a good spot or a bad spot, and that's going to help you understand what we're talking about, why we're talking about it. Every game is included that we talk about. This is a free article and a free podcast, and it is listed under DFSArmy.com's NFL tab. Scroll down and find it. Inside the research station, this is VIP only material. It goes into a lot more detail as to what we're looking at when it comes to these graphics. This is put together in a very, very articulate, very meticulous manner to show you and hopefully make your time most efficient when it comes to researching the slate. Again, you see the same graphic I just showed you, just blown up a little bit bigger. You're going to see that Kansas City is mediocre with opposite quarterbacks. So Derek Carr's in a mediocre spot. You can see that if they had a running game, Oakland's in a pretty good spot because Kansas City allows points to running backs. They don't allow much to the wide receiver too. They don't allow much. They do allow to ones and slot receivers, and they're mediocre against the tight end. Doesn't mean much for Oakland unless you want to target these positions. What it does mean for the Kansas City side is Oakland is bad against the quarterback. Alex Smith, good spot. Bad against the running back. Kareem Hunt, good spot. Bad against the wide receiver 1. Whether or not that's Tyreek Hill or Chris Conley on the outside, I'm not sure. What I know is green, green, green. Doesn't matter wherever Tyreek Hill is. He's in a good spot this week. We know that Oakland is typically bad against tight ends. Travis Kelce, good spot. The trick is whether or not you want to play the Thursday night game. We talked about it on the podcast. Make up your own opinion. When we scroll down a little bit more, this was asked to me by a member. I may do a deeper article on it a different time or a deeper video on it, but for right now, let's dive in a little bit and tell you what defense versus pass direction tells you. We're the only website I know that covers a graphic like this, and it's a beautiful thing. Let's focus again on Kansas City facing Oakland. Why is Oakland bad? Why is Oakland showing green all along here? Because their deep ball ranking is 20. Green is good, red is bad. Okay, the right side is where Peters plays on Kansas City because he's pretty much a shutdown corner. He's a good corner. That means that whoever lines up over here on the right side of the field is going to have a hell of a day as far as producing. They're going to get their top knocked off because Kansas City defends the right side of the field very well. Over here, back to the Kansas City offense and the Oakland defense. Oakland does not defend the deep ball very well. They do not defend the short ball very well. They don't defend the right side very well. They don't defend the left. In fact, they're league worst on the left side. That's that cornerback that we hear about that keeps getting torched week in and week out. And the middle of the field is the only spot we're not going to have a lot of success, which makes me wonder because they give up points to tight ends. basically we're talking bottom 5 secondary here. This is a bad spot for Oakland and a good spot for Kansas City to take advantage of some of that. So I would expect Alex Smith and the receivers to have a fairly decent day when they throw the ball. The 27, 26, 27 is just a ranking. We have 32 teams in the NFL. That's worst. That's like third worst, fifth worst, whatever. And that's basically how you read this chart. It doesn't take a lot of complex thought and a lot of really digging into. You're looking for the fact that if a wide receiver runs most of his routes on the right side and he locks up against a cornerback that defends the right side, you're in a bad matchup. So that would favor the other side of the ball. First of all, the volume's going to go over here. The quarterback is going to be throwing away from this coverage most of the time. He's going to be throwing this way. That's why these numbers show up lopsided so often. But when you're bad in both spots, you're just flat out bad. If we scroll down a little bit and find another one to look at, we can see that the Tennessee defense, in other words, what Cleveland is attacking, don't throw it deep. Tennessee's not giving up points to deep balls. They're giving up a lot to short balls. So you can find a short slot receiver for Cleveland. You might be in a decent spot. Right side, left side, not so bad. Now here's the left side. This is the Cleveland cornerback that shut down DeAndre Hopkins last week. He plays on the left side of the field, which means whichever one of these Tennessee receivers is the number one, or I guess the number two technically, and runs against on the left side of the field, he's going to have a hard day ahead of him, because this is even better than the Kansas City numbers that we just saw. Number 7 ranked defense or defense of that left side of the field means that when the receiver lines up over here, he ain't getting thrown to. As a result, the right side or the middle gets thrown to, and that's where Cleveland is leaking. Cleveland is springing leaks in their bathtub or in their boat on this left side of the field, where they are league worst now. And it looks like short right side of the formation passes are the ones that are really going ham on this Cleveland defense. So if you can find somebody like a Rishard Matthews that's going to run some short passes from the right side of the formation, he's going to avoid this cornerback over here, and he's going to have himself a pretty decent spot to put up some points. So it turns out Rishard Matthews is fairly cheap this week too. So if you can dig into your research a little bit deeper and find where Rishard Matthews lines up, moves around the formation some, when he's over on the right side, he should have a good day. When he's on the left side, he's going to have trouble. But that's up to you to dig deep. We do a little bit of that inside the Army for our VIPs, and that's what part of the membership has its privileges comes with, because we're going to talk to our members about that stuff. Being that this is a free article or a free podcast or a free video, you guys need to dig in a little bit deeper with us if you really, really, really want the goods. I'm just showing you what's out there and answering a VIP question for the public, because if he has the question, a lot of other people do too. In a nutshell, that's what we're dealing with. When I look at the research station, though, I also go down to quarterback, running back, wide receiver tabs, and I take a look at what gosh, if it would pull up here. That's terrible. There we go. At least we can look at some running backs for now. We've got dollar point per value. We've got salaries organized and projections and things like that. So while you're kind of looking at some of these running backs, that I'll go ahead and release for free this week for you. But if you want the wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, and whatnot, you need to come into the Army and unlock this for yourself. What I wanted to do is really quickly talk about some of the plays that I had selected, the core that I'm talking about. Your quarterback, I'm looking at Carson Wentz, and I know he's not on a lot of the main slates, but I'm looking at Carson Wentz as a play this week, a home favorite, high implied total, and he's basically a box checker. If you follow, again, it's a VIP article, but if you follow my article, The Check Down, in graphic form like this, I have categories, and I put check marks in these categories, and then the names that check off the most boxes are the safest, most consistent plays, or in the best spot that week. It's identified Carson Wentz when nobody else did. It has identified other quarterbacks and other running backs that have had great weeks. Last week it was absolutely on point, and it led me personally to a sweep of my FanDuel ladder where I put in $10 and got out $40 or $50. So it's a pretty simple process, and it is designed more for cash type plays and safe type plays. But that box checking article will put you on a Carson Wentz this week. It'll also put you on probably the best quarterback play, honestly, for cash games especially, in Tom Brady this week. They've got that Sunday night shootout coming up against Atlanta. Again, not on the main slate, so that sucks for the DraftKings guys. But on FanDuel, we can get a piece of that slate if we play the right one. And I would probably start my building this week with Tom Brady. Again, home, being favored, high implied total. Those are big. Facing a defense that's not so good against the pass. Those are just massive green flags and bullseyes, targets that we should be looking at. And price be damned. If we can find the value elsewhere in our lineups, then we can lead off with Tom Brady this week. Whereas usually I leave quarterback for later in my building process, only because there's not a lot of spread in those points, and the position is anything but scarce. So we can usually pay down and get similar production, which allows us then to pay up at running back or pay up, for a tight end or a defense, and get the more consistent production out of that position, and therefore build overall stability for our lineup from top to bottom. It's about your overall score, not specifically the quarterback, oh, he touches the ball and he scores the most points. Well, some weeks you can sacrifice those points so that you can then buy up and take a Rob Gronkowski last week or something to that effect, which is what's going to boost your overall lineup score and put you in the top half, top third, top 20% of the contests that we like to talk about inside our ladder structure. So that's another article to look up. I'll put it in related content probably for you to dig into a little bit today, because it's an absolutely mind-blowing concept that will really make your game better and preserve your bankroll longer. If I was going off of those other slates and going more to the main slate, I'd probably be focused on Dak Prescott this week. He's the second highest point per game fantasy quarterback this year, which means that he's in, a very consistent guy from week in and week out, and he has a little bit more of a ceiling this year than he has in the past, which is a good thing. And he's facing San Francisco, which is ranked 24th against the quarterback position, which means they give up or tend to give up a lot of points. I will also tell you that the wide receivers don't necessarily do so good against San Francisco. Therefore, you're probably better off running Dak in naked fashion where you only use him. I will also tell you that in the running backs, well, let's just jump the running backs. I'll tell you this in a second, but Le'Veon Bell is averaging 30 touches per game. Cincinnati allows running back production. They're ranked 17th in DVP right now, and we know that as a rivalry spot, and we know that Ben has had his issues, and we know that some of the other wide receivers haven't shown up outside of Antonio Brown. Le'Veon Bell's in a good spot, and Le'Veon Bell's going to get work. If you throw out week one, I think he's the highest volume running back in the league right now, or I should say again, because that's what he is. Week one, we saw a little bit of a slouch in his volume and his production, but since then he's just been raging in the volume department, and his numbers have come back the past 2 weeks. So Le'Veon Bell is Le'Veon Bell. There's nothing wrong with the guy. In a great spot every single week. This week, above average spot for him. The one I wanted to talk to you about that I left the quarterbacks for was Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah, we're going to talk about running Dak a little bit naked without some receivers maybe. I mean, if you want to run Dez is in a good spot. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that in a little while too. But the main thing is you're going to want to run Dak naked as the way the San Francisco offense or defense sets up to allowing points towards those quarterbacks. Because of that, though, and because they're away and they're favored by 6 points, they should be grinding the clock late. We've got Ezekiel Elliott, who's going on suspension, maybe not, whatever. I don't think they're going to rest Zeke. I think they're going to just run him into the dirt until his suspension hits. And therefore, with high volume running back in a good running back spot, with Ezekiel Elliott leading the league, or I guess second in the league in touches, San Francisco's now number 31, second worst against the running back in terms of schedule-adjusted points. So if you take the strength of schedule and factor it in, Ezekiel Elliott is in the second best matchup in the league. He's going to get the touches. He's going to get the volume, and the dude should just be smashing. So what do? I've got a quarterback situation that runs naked and benefits the second most consistent quarterback in the league, or the second highest point scoring quarterback in the league, facing a bad defense. And I've got him along with a running back who is going to get high volume and a high workload in a great spot, a great matchup, a great Vegas total, a great Vegas spread, lending all of these boxes being checked into these two guys' favor. What do? Because you always hear out in the DFS world, don't run your quarterback and your running back. They can't have good games at the same time. I'm going to tell you it's bullshit. It's actually positively correlated if you look at correlation charts. And to be quite honest with you, Dak does throw the ball to Zeke some. And if you get lucky like we did 3 weeks ago and he throws a receiving touchdown to Zeke, you get the double dip. You get the point. So you've got the potential for that. You've got Dak that can run with his legs and run a ball in on his own. You've got Zeke who has 2 TD upside and 100-yard upside and catches a few targets and runs, can break open in space and is going to get all the work he can possibly. Run them both, man. How much have I rambled about this? Run them both. On the main slate, I personally would probably start there in cash because now I get every piece of every touchdown that Dallas scores this week, and I've got it with both the quarterback and the running back, and I've got the possibility of the double dip if he throws one out into the flat in the red zone and Zeke just runs one in on, off of the pass. So the point is, you got a very, very high floor there. You've got a pretty good ceiling there too. So that's the type of situation that we look to stack in cash where we can correlate and then go after those higher upside contests like the triple ups, quintuple ups, 100-man leagues, small GPPs, things like that. That kind of a combination can win you a 20-man league on FanDuel super, super easy, just like it did 3 weeks ago when I haven't gotten off the train. I don't know why anybody else has. The other running backs I like, Todd Gurley's in a good spot. I know Arizona looks strong against it as a rushing defense, but they still allow fantasy points to the running back. Todd Gurley right now is the number 2 fantasy point running back when you talk about fantasy points per game at 21 points per game. That ain't fooling around. That's a good spot. And it's going to be a sneaky spot this week because people are going to be afraid of that Arizona defense. But you're over in London where these games can go high scoring, and Gurley is going to get the rock. He's a high volume guy. They design pass plays specifically to get him out in open space, one thing Jeff Fisher never did. And it has just resurged Todd Gurley's career into what is now a $8,400 to $8,500 running back and still a value at that price point. Lesean Mccoy is another one I would focus on. Lesean McCoy is the lead receiver on that team with Charles Clay being out and the fact that they have no other receivers. And he is a high volume workload running back that's going to get 20, 25 touches and a few receptions. And he's in himself in a good spot as a home favorite. He has home road splits that favor him at home, especially when he's a favorite. This is a perfect spot for him. And Mark Ingram, why not go back to the well? We're going to go face Green Bay up in Lambeau, and we know that Drew Brees is probably going to be throwing some, but we know that the Green Bay defense is a little bit suspect. Mark Ingram's price got jacked up. That's going to scare the world. And I'm telling you right now it shouldn't because it still didn't get jacked up high enough to what it looks like he might be getting ready to do in the absence of Adrian Peterson. Outside shot to Adrian Peterson, you can go back to the well there too. But at 7,100, I like Mark Ingram again as a value play that might get me up to a Tom Brady if I'm playing that slate. So bear those running backs in mind. Those are the guys I would be going for. I don't very often pay way down low for running backs because running backs are pretty consistent and I'm buying that floor and I'm buying that 2 touchdown upside. I didn't mention Leonard Fournette, and I'm going to tell you he's kind of in play. He's getting pricey at 9K, but he's getting the work. He's a big play back. He's broke a few long touchdowns. He does get a couple of targets a game, but what I'm worried about is his ankle. Ankle injuries for running backs that have to cut and be shifty are no joke. You need to watch the injury report as the week goes on, and you need to be paying attention to if he's on the final injury report, you don't play him. He's a GPP only pick because that ankle is significant enough to continue bothering him, and he's not going to be effective. He's not going to be as effective. He's not going to be $9,000 effective, okay? Even if he gets 20, 25 touches. He's a risk because usually production dips on those foot and ankle injuries for running backs, and because of that adding that risk takes him out of cash consideration. GPP pick, sure, if his ankle's really not bothering that bad and the ibuprofen works, then maybe he goes off again. He certainly can, but the risk is what keeps him out of being cash. I'd rather go with a Le'Veon Bell. I'd rather go with an Ezekiel Elliott. I'd almost rather go with a Todd Gurley. I'd certainly rather go with a Lesean McCoy this week. These guys are in the kinds of spots where traditionally they're going to succeed. Leonard Fournette is, even though going against Indianapolis, is in the kind of spot where he traditionally should succeed, but then again, we don't know how bad that ankle is. And history has shown ankle injuries are death to running back production. So stay away from that unless he comes off of that injury report, in which case jump on him and include him in those core picks. If we look at wide receivers this week, let's do this. Let's go to the wide receiver tab and we'll talk a little bit about some of these wide receivers. We're going to need value here because we need to pay for those running backs. We need to maybe pay for those quarterbacks. So we're going to need value from here on out in the wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense type range. Kicker defense, not so much. It's nice to get the cheap guy, but to be honest with you, there's not enough spread in the salary from top to bottom in those that it doesn't matter too terribly much. So you might want to pick a couple of them out, one up high and one down low, and then if you really need that extra money when you get towards the end of your build, boom, you drop down to the cheaper defense, and maybe that frees up enough to not punt two positions at wide receiver, or maybe it affords you a little bit better, another $500 better running back that's going to have that floor or in a little bit better matchup. That's how we do when we build lineups. Jarvis Landry would be where I would start this week. 11.5 targets per game. Number 2 only to DeAndre Hopkins. The red zone work has always been a bit of an issue, but this year it's been better. It's been better at the expense of Jay Ajayi, but it's been better. And we're running into a situation where I want to check with my buddy Mark with DFS Weather. You can follow him on Twitter, I believe, at DFS NFL Weather. At any rate, I want to check with him because I've heard some little bitty rumors or little bitty puffs of wind that this is going to be a breezy game, that the Miami game is going to be a little bit windy. If that's the case, we might not be throwing so deep to a Devontae Parker. Instead, we might be focusing a little bit more on the underneath routes, and that brings Jarvis Landry in play because the dude runs 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and then cuts in or out or on a slant. That's about all he does. He's kind of a one-trick pony, but he gets a little bit of that separation quickly, and he just eats up 11.5 targets per game. That if we're throwing those high percentage plays, even on a FanDuel, we're going to have some kind of a floor, and it's a matter of whether or not we get into the end zone. Lately, with the red zone work that he has sort of been getting more than usual, we can count on maybe him getting another touchdown this week if the targets go up from 11 to 12, 13, 14, 15 targets. Maybe we're going to have to use him in the red zone. So it stands to reason Jarvis Landry is a pretty darn good value play this week. Pierre Garcon. Would you believe there are only 10 wide receivers in the league right now that are averaging 9 targets a game or more? And Pierre Garcon is one of them. That's very, very important to note because if they're going to at all keep it close against Dallas coming to town, they're going to need Pierre Garcon. And Dallas is not a great secondary. They rank, I think it's like 19th or something like that against the wide receiver 1. Therefore, Pierre Garcon's actually in a pretty good spot. If that new quarterback can actually feed him the ball, which he did target him last week, so hopefully he continues targeting him, we get open, and we get a little bit of competitiveness out of that game that will keep Dak and Zeke flowing and will bring Pierre Garcon into the value play at wide receiver. It's a neat little spot to kind of run one back in a GPP for sure. I don't know that I would use all 3 of those guys in cash, but you might. It's not a worse situation, and when you need a little bit of value, you're looking for targets. Jarvis Landry and Pierre Garcon would be 2 that I'd be looking at. The third would be Rashard Matthews, and I know that the Cleveland issue with that guy, I don't know that that guy shadows anybody. I need to look into that. You need to look into that, and we need to double check and make sure. But if the cornerback in Cleveland does not shadow receivers and they can put Rashard Matthews over on that left side or the right side, wherever that defense is weak, he can have a hell of a day because he's going to get targeted. Delanie Walker's going to get targeted as a tight end for sure facing Cleveland, but Rashard Matthews is also going to get his 6, 7, 8, 9 targets in that game. And at a cheap price of like $4,900 on FanDuel, whatever he is, if I look at his price, $5,500 on FanDuel, that's not terrible. If you're getting the targets and you're getting the workload, it's not the worst thing in the world. 4 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets, 10. So the targets are there other than last week where he dipped a little bit. The targets are kind of in the 5 to 10 range. And it looks like quite a bit of the time they're up over 6 targets. Good. The receptions are up and down, the yardage, the TD. It depends on TDs over here on FanDuel, but you've got yourself a pretty good floor, of about 8 or 9 points. And at $5,500, that's not the worst thing in the world when it allows you to buy up those running backs that are in even better spots, or if it allows you to get up to a Tom Brady on that slate or even a Dak for his price. So bear that in mind. You might need a Mark Ingram. You might need a Rashard Matthews to reach up to those higher spots. At tight end, what I'm looking at is going after the bad defenses. And the bad defenses, of course, are Delanie Walker against Cleveland. We know that that's a very, very bad spot. for the defense. There's no red zone work with Delanie Walker this year, which really, really irks me. He's only been targeted one time, I think, inside the 10-yard line. And that bothers me because those targets have to go somewhere. Maybe they go to Rashard Matthews. Maybe they go to, DeMarco Murray or Derrick Henry. I don't know. What I do know is the targets are there for Delanie Walker, just not inside the red zone. Cleveland allows 21.6 points per game to tight ends. So Delanie Walker should have himself a good day unless for whatever reason they don't continue to use him or they continue to not use him in the red zone. That would really, really suck for your fantasy team. So where would your pivots go? Where would you look at otherwise? Well, I would look to Kyle Rudolph in Minnesota because Baltimore is not good against the tight end either. And honestly, he's the safety valve. If there's no Diggs there, his volume's going to come up, and he's a safety valve for Sam Bradford for sure, but for Case Keenum to a certain degree as well. And that's going to bring him in play as a cheaper value tight end, which will again allow you to spend up in other positions. Jack Doyle is another one. This is what I want you to understand when it comes to looking at defenses and how they work. And when we talk about funnel defense, this is what we're talking about with Jacksonville. Jacksonville has great cornerback play on the outside. They shut people down. So what opens up as a result? I mean, if I can't throw out there, I've got to throw the ball somewhere. I've got to throw the ball more in towards the middle of the field. Who typically runs into the middle of the field? If I've got two corners man-to-man, I can send both my right and left receivers out on some kind of an in cut or a slant or a post type route. It doesn't matter because that guy's going to be on him like glue. So who's left open? The guy that runs the flat routes like a Leonard Fournette, or the guy that runs across the middle, some kind of a slot receiver and gets in there with a linebacker or something like that, or the tight end. So when you look at the tight end against Jacksonville, Jacksonville's not great at defending the tight end. Well, we have Jack Doyle, who had 11 targets last week and who honestly is one of the more targeted receivers. And if T.Y. Hilton's going to be shut down, then that opens up Jack Doyle. And we didn't mention him on the podcast last night, and it's kind of my bad for not doing so. But that would be a value pick that's not in a terrible spot. Not in a great spot, but it's a highly volatile position anyway, so you might as well save some money where you can. On the other slate, I would look at none other than Zach Ertz, and I'd stack his ass with Carson Wentz. Zach Ertz is a clear number one. This week, Washington is number 28 in DVP versus your tight end, so they're bad, and they're allowing 16.6 points per game. I think that Zach Ertz can go over that if he gets into the red zone and gets in. That was my concern going into this year. He's kind of solved that. He's been utilized. He's got quite a few touchdowns on the year, so I like the spot that he's sitting in. When I go down to kickers and defenses, we'll wrap this up really, really quickly. Kickers, Steven Gostkowski, home favorite, high implied total, shootout type of game. Very, very good spot for him. Ryan Suckup, again, facing a defense that allows kickers to go off, and he's fairly cheap. He's having himself a good year in a defense or in an offense that kind of seems to stall down in the red zone, which leads to more opportunity for your kicker to boot field goals. And Jake Elliott on the other slates in Philadelphia, you could pair him with a Carson Wentz or a Zach Ertz or something like that, even almost in cash, because you're getting a little focused on one game there, but you're in such a good spot, it's almost okay. He's in a similar situation with the others, with being home and favored and implied to score some points, and that's always a good spot for our kickers. On the defensive side of the ball, Minnesota is going to be very, very chalky this week. I know that we thought Seattle might be, but Minnesota is going to be incredibly chalky. We proved on the podcast, or they proved to me, that Joe Flacco is turnover prone, and that puts Minnesota in a very, very good spot, being home and favored. So, chalk. If you want to get off of that a little bit, Pittsburgh's in a good spot as well. The implied total against of 18 points. That's not very good when teams get that low. When the opposing, like Cincinnati, the opposing team is only implied to score 18 points. That's what we're looking for. So we're looking for a low total under 18 points, and we start looking at the defense. Pittsburgh tends to take the ball away a little bit. They're a home favorite. They're sitting in a good spot. They're a good defense to look at. Tennessee's a great defense to look at. Cleveland's absolutely inept. They've been turning the ball over like crazy, and that just brings us back to target them with a lot of fantasy players, whether it be offensive or defensive. So that puts Tennessee in play. The sneaky one is going to be the LA Chargers. Look how far down the list they are, especially on FanDuel. All the way down here. damn near minimum price. But we know they've got some cornerbacks that can take the ball away. They're cheap. They're home. They're favored. And Denver allows points to special teams and defenses. Trevor Siemian's been a little turnover prone. Why can't he chuck a couple to the Chargers? You guys, this is going to be a spot like New Orleans last week that has potential. Will it score 30 points? No, probably not. But it has the potential to have a very, very good day for you. And when you're down here at 4,100 versus 5,500, that's $1,400 that you could take a flyer down in here, get 6 or 8 points, fantasy points for it, and then go take that 1,500 and buy up your quarterback or buy up your running backs and get more. Because let's say that the good defenses score like 15 points. If you got 10 to 15 points out of your defense, you've got yourself a good day. You didn't win the nuts, but you got yourself a good, solid defensive day. So if we're going to get 6 or 8 out of the Chargers, and we need, say, 10 to 15, we really only need another 5 to 7 points or so out of our other positions to make up that difference. Can I do that with $1,500? Of course I can. I can buy up a quarterback and get 7 points for $1,500. I can buy up a running back and get 7 points for $1,500 difference, and oftentimes more. So that's why you would maybe pay down in this spot today, is because you need that savings to buy up those other spots. Maybe you get off of a Mark Ingram and go to a Lesean Mccoy and make 7 points of difference there. This is where the DFS gets fun, and this is, again, why you need to be a VIP inside the DFS Army, because we compare and contrast this stuff all week long in our Slack channels and in our Slack forums. You can see that the NFL room is already just going ballistic this morning with all of these articles released, all of this conversation, everything going from front to back, asking all of these questions and getting answers from all of our VIPs inside there. If you want to talk fantasy sports and you want to do it early in the morning, we've got the crowd for you. You want to do it late in the evening, we've got the crowd for you. You want to do it overnight, we've got guys that are up at night. We have the crowd for you. We're over 1,000 members strong at this point, and we're posting over 18 and 20,000 messages a week in our Slack forums. Believe me, the advice is there for you. The coaching is there for you. Follow the link, the description in the article here, dfsarmy.com. Use code CHOP, C-H-O-P, and that will trigger a 20% off discount. It'll let the boys know where you found me, where you came from when you joined the Army, and believe me, you won't look back. You won't turn around. You'll make more money. You'll become a better player. You'll preserve your bankroll better for sure. And you'll get to talk to these coaches, shorten your growth curve, become a better daily fantasy player, and have a good week. It's week 7. We had a good time. We wrapped up the core list. Hope you took notes. Hope you learned something. Come back next week. Give me a little like. Give me subscribe to my channel inside this tab. Let's build this format too. Follow me out on Twitter at Chopadong. And let's have ourselves a hell of a week, guys.